To have two of my panelists, Dr. Zhan Xianyuan and Kevin Xu from China and from the United States to share with us. Let's get right into the topic. And I want to focus not just on the competition, for sure there is, but I'm sure there are also areas of common interest, of collaboration. And I also want to talk about the people-to-people aspects of this, as that is the theme of this forum. So why don't we start with each of you a quick opening thoughts, maybe, not so formal. Dr. Zhan, in terms of the competition part, let's start with the hard one. How fierce is that competition, and where are we respectively?
I think it's for computer science and especially artificial intelligence, actually it's like the competition is very fierce and between countries and even between research teams. So it's I think computer science and artificial intelligence are one of the most open and most fast-paced discipline across any other conventional, as compared to any conventional disciplines. For example, it's like most of the AI researchers, once they have done the research, they can't wait to publish their work openly online as soon as possible, because it's like the research goes so fast. And even it's like the research published half a year ago that already considered as old. And also it's computer science is actually also a field that has huge emphasis on the open source and reproducibility. So basically, it's like the barrier exists, but it's like not that large, and everybody is catching up very closely. I think currently the U.S. is definitely is still in a leading position, and but at least from what I see, in the recent 3 years, also Chinese companies and Chinese universities and labs, and also they are also doing a lot of great works, and they are catching up. And of course, there is some of the restrictions like the GPUs and some of the other inconveniences like the travel visas. It's like currently for a lot of Chinese researchers and students, if they want to attend the AI conferences in US, basically it's like getting a visa become a pain. Because it's like in the last 2 years, it's like
because the American government does not want to share its latest outcome with Chinese researchers. Is that why they're not getting visas so easily?
I think generally, because AI is a very sensitive subject, so basically it's like if you are an AI researcher, basically getting a visa, they will prolong the check-in period. And usually it will take more time, and even the conference has passed, then you still cannot get a visa. Yeah, so basically I missed 2 very important conferences this year and the previous year. Yeah, but it's if the conference is held in Europe, so basically it's the problem is not basically it's not an issue. And basically I think it's a pity, because currently in top AI conferences, about 1/3 of the papers are actually from China. It's like a lot of Chinese researchers are going to present their works at these conferences and share their knowledge. And all these conferences, actually, all their papers will be openly available online. So it's basically, I think it does not have a lot of meaning to not let the Chinese researchers to present their works. Yeah, I think that is the competition part.
Okay. Kevin, your understanding of the competitive elements in this race.
Well, first of all, thank you again, the National Committee, for inviting me to this wonderful event, and for Tsinghua for being our wonderful local host. I will kind of zoom out a little bit from what Dr. Zhan just said, because if you see kind of my quick summary, I'm currently an investor. I used to work in some of these tech companies like GitHub, for example. And before that, I served in the White House during the Obama administration. I'll weave in some of these different elements together of my personal experience to give everybody a broader view of this AI competition, because I know that the audience is very diverse. Some of you may live and breathe AI every day. Some of you are just, sort of hear about ChatGPT and use it here and there, or other equivalents in China. And I came up with this way of describing this During my 37-hour travel time from my house in Nashville to Beijing airport, it felt like a good idea at the time. Let's see if it works today. I'm going to use two utensils that's very people to people, fork and a pair of chopsticks, to describe the dynamic of the four main layers of this AI thing in general. The first layer is at the very bottom. It's power, land, and kind of this big construction project that you have to do to build a shell for a data center. I'm going to use chopsticks to describe that because it's very much two parallel universes, right? And that kind of makes sense intuitively. You build your power in the US, you build your power in China, two different places. Each country has their own energy and construction and real estate policy. What's interesting now is that I think a lot of folks in the US have come to grips with the fact that China holds the edge on this one, particularly in nuclear power. There is a huge renaissance of nuclear power interest in the United States very recently, that we need to build more nuclear power, largely because of the power hungriness of AI, and also because there's a lot of kind of looking across the Pacific to see all the nuclear capacity that's been built in China. China, I think, doubled its nuclear power production capacity over the last 10 years. I think China just approved 11 nuclear power plants last year. At least that's what ChatGPT told me this morning. So that's the power land layer. Now the next layer is the chips layer that Dr. Zhan was talking about. These are chips, servers, networking cable. Think of this as the stuff that goes into these data center shells that have to hooked up to the power. This is also increasingly a chopstick layer. The reason why I use chopsticks is because if you're a proper chopstick user, they will never touch each other, right? These are two kind of parallel places, and because of the export control that I think a lot of you are aware of, both countries are very kind of incentivized to have their own supply for these very critical hardware, right? That is the truth of it. And right now, the US definitely has the most advanced hardware in this regard. So, there's some advantage on the US side on this layer. Now I'm gonna switch to the fork. The next layer is the model layer. This is the GPT part of ChatGPT, right? These are the layers that, these huge models that are being built in the research labs in some of these big companies. I'm using fork because there's a much more intertwined nature in that layer because of the way science and development and kind of building technology works. Even though we're only talking about ChatGPT now, the paper, right, that really kind of gave the architectural foundation was published in 2017. It's called All Attention is All You Need. It's from Google, right? And that is the first paper that really described the T part of ChatGPT, transformer, right? And more or less all the huge language models so far are based on that architecture. So there's so much cross-pollination here in terms of the model building side. And I think most of the advanced models are still in China, but in the United States. But a lot of Chinese makers of the models are still, catching up because there's, again, a lot of exchange here from the programming side. The last layer, and I will end my soliloquy, is the ultimate layer, which is the application, right? It's the agents, it's the chat part of ChatGPT. But there could be so much more to this technology that is still being formed right now because we don't know yet. ChatGPT was born on November 30th, 2022. That was less than 2 years ago. It got smart pretty quickly, but it's still a very young technology, and everybody in technology is trying to figure out, what is the right application, what is the super app, what is the thing that's gonna get people to really get a lot out of this technology that we are spending billions and billions of dollars to build the power, to build the data center, et cetera, et cetera. That is also a fork because, again, there's a lot of cross-pollination of how do you build the best app? How do you build the best service? At least in Silicon Valley, everyone's aware of how powerful WeChat is. Everyone's a little bit envious that WeChat and the super apps here in China are really kind of hit a spot of ultimate user experience. So there's a lot of cross-pollination over there as well. So that's why it's a fork. So to summarize, 2 pairs of chopsticks on the bottom, 2 forks on the top, and then back to you.
Wow. That's a hard one. A lot of food for thought. I'll try to
Good pun.
I'll try to digest that. are the interpreters catching up? Take a breath. I mean, but I mean, this is why this topic is so fascinating, because I think basically, if I understand correctly, the United States is ahead in some areas, but China also has its advantages, and it's probably inevitable. And from some of the numbers we're seeing, for instance, in the patent area, the application of AI or machine learning patents that China actually overtook the United States, and the collaboration between Chinese and American researchers in terms of AI research also is very high, much higher than the collaboration between China and the UK, which is a great surprise to me, seeing all the news that are making headlines, you know, the kind of hostility and restriction that the US government. So I want to put this second question to you. What really are the opportunities, the common interests we are looking at if we're able to overcome some of the man-made difficulties in collaboration? What can we potentially do together? And I'm not talking about, you know, a nice picture, utopia scenario in the future, but really realizable, practical scenarios, fruits that we can touch. Because when Chinese President Xi Jinping met with US President Joe Biden, and on multiple occasions, they stressed on the kind of collaboration of common interest on the AI area again and again. So I would like to know your thoughts on really the way forward. Kevin, if you want to go ahead.
I'll take a stab at this if the interpreter is not tired of my voice. I think there are a lot of practical concerns that people who are building AI, especially in the startup world, are all trying to wrestle with. And there's not a whole lot of existing Chinese, or did this thing come from China, or etc. They're looking for the best algorithm that frankly could drive the lowest cost so their product can launch and, you know, make money, basically, right? So Dr. Zhan talked about open source. There is a very vibrant ecosystem of open source technology building. And for those of you who've never heard of open source before, it's basically this paradigm of building technology where you build a piece of code, you throw it onto the internet on a website like GitHub, for example, where I used to work, but also other places like Hugging Face, GitLab, etc. And everybody in the world can see it. You can download it, you can change it, you can fork it. That's actually a term of art. You copy it, you change it, and then you do whatever you want with it. It just permeates the entire world, right? We talk about people to people. I like to think of it in my little nerdy land as programmer to programmer, or developer to developer. And there is already things happening where, because I would say the US AI development trajectory is becoming a little bit more closed, right? GPT is a closed source model. A Gemini from Google is closed sourced. A Llama from Meta or Facebook is the largest open weight model. I don't even call it open source, and we don't have to talk about this now, but we can talk about it offline why that's important, distinction. And a lot of startups in Silicon Valley are looking for a Chinese tech company who are open sourcing their latest model, or from Tsinghua, or from, you know, other academic institutions, just to make their product better and cheaper and easier to use. So that is, I think, one opportunity that's very organic. You don't really need a policy or a photo op for these things to happen. These are all programmers who work in their basement or work in their tech company. They just want to live in the online world. Yeah. So that's one.
You want to stop here? Yeah. Dr.
Okay.
Zhan.
I think I will maybe just look back a bit and share a little story from my past experience. And about 10 years ago, when I was a student at Microsoft Research Asia, which is also in Beijing, and I was an intern by that time. And at that year, so 4 Chinese researchers actually published a paper called Deep Residue Network for image recognition, something, and all short for always short as the ResNet. So basically, that became the key step to make the deep neural network really deep and big. And that actually changed everything. That is one of the most cited paper in computer science. And currently, I think it's about 240,000 citations. And even current transformers, they use that in their architecture. So those are 4 Chinese researchers working for a U.S. company, and also collaborate with other U.S. colleagues, and they make great things, and they benefit the whole world, and drastically change the entire AI research. And I think that is a good thing. I was there. So I was quite young, I think it's a second-year PhD student. And so at that time, Microsoft Research has a very open environment. We have the Chinese students and researchers, and we also have the US researchers, and the researcher from Japanese and a lot of other countries. So everybody is like very excited to work together and really do great things together, and passionate about the change. So I think that is good old days. Yeah.
Wow, good old days. Just last month, the current U.S. administration announced measures to restrict investment on semiconductor, on quantum IT, on certain aspects of AI. I don't know specifically what they mean by certain aspects of AI, and the restriction is very broad. Basically, if an American is serving as a consultant for an international company, for instance, that company or that American person will be held responsible if that company is collaborating with a Chinese company on AI. That is, basically, I don't know how to describe that. It's very comprehensive restriction. So looking forward, the kind of environment where programmer-to-programmer collaboration has been open on a people-to-people level, could there be obstacle in the future to restrict this kind of people-to-people collaboration on the AI level? Looking forward, how optimistic, how pessimistic are you about the situation, and what can we do, right, to be part of, to make the future not as bad as it can be?
At least I think for some fundamental research, and I think currently is, at least in research community, everybody is still quite open. We publish papers, and we share with everybody else. And currently,
do you think there's a risk that, for instance, there could be policy blocking this kind of open exchange of building blocks from both sides?
Yeah, I think at a certain level, and there will be some obstacles. And at least it's like if you want to really build some very sophisticated large models, and I think the barrier is between both sides is higher. Fundamental research is still fine because it does not take a lot of resource, and it's mostly intellectual work. And I think also because AI is still a quite a young field, and a lot of to be explored, a lot of unknown, and everybody's talking about AGI. It looks like AI already can solve everything, but currently I think it depends on the fields. For some of the digital world tasks, and I think we're already at the doorstep of the AGI. But in
AGI
the
mean
artificial general
intelligence. Okay.
Yeah, but it's like for a lot of other fields, especially in the physical world, and so it's like the AI's performance is still not good because I'm also working on embodied AI, robotic stuff, and if you really want a robot to act like the human or even like the animal, and they can do general purpose tasking, and still is there's a significant challenge out there. So I think it's a lot of places it's like AI is not as strong as we thought, but in some places, so for some tasks, AI is already very strong. Yeah, but still lots of technical problems need to be explored and solved. I think the exploration process actually needs the collaboration between those sides. We need talented people to work on all these challenging problems, and because there's still much to explore, and it's not an end game. And I think it's still maybe in an early stage.
Kevin?
I think I really appreciate Liu Xin you kind of setting up the stage before we had our conversation, because I don't think we want to be delusional about how competitive this setup is, but I think from a programmer to program perspective, I know there are chatters in DC about ultimately even restricting open source because of this competitive dynamic. It's so incredibly, I cannot foresee an actual policy framework that will make any reasonable sense, let alone the enforcement mechanism that has to be in place to restrict bits and bytes of code that flows around the entire world that powers all of our devices. You can track money, right? So there's investment. You can track hardware to a certain extent. You can track supply chain stuff, but you cannot track code, right? That's just an impossible task. It's also not a very useful task from the competitive dynamic perspective. So I feel reasonably comfortable that doesn't matter how competitive this dynamic gets, code will flow back and forth. And this is not necessarily a U.S. China direction, right? When a team in China open sources something on GitHub that's useful, a team in Turkey is going to pick it up. They're going to fork it. They're going to change it. They're going to put it into their own repository elsewhere. That's going to get picked up by a team from Sweden and then Brazil, and then may ultimately circle back to a company in the United States. There is this term called software supply chain as well, which is a very important topic that could be an element of collaboration, because we all need to have secure code to run our devices, our companies' computers, and of course the government side of things as well. There's a lot of room there. And if I can just inject one other idea that I think could also be interesting for collaboration, less so maybe on the people-to-people side, but on the municipal-to-municipal side, right? All of you are probably aware of robo-taxi coming, autonomous driving cars picking us up, no more cab drivers. I think earlier this year, Baidu's product in Wuhan really blew up momentarily because of a bigger kind of launch, but also immediately the Didi drivers and delivery folks in Wuhan got nervous as well. Well, you know what? We got a lot of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and DoorDash drivers and Instacart drivers all over the United States as well. There is a reasonable chance that China or one of the Chinese cities could be the first to really launch robo-taxi at scale. And with that adoption comes the downstream kind of societal civic effect of how do you manage this technology, right? And if there's any good learning from this city, I don't know which city it could be, I would love for that to be shared for the entire world, because we're really kind of jumping into new unknown territories in a lot of these AI applications, and robo-taxi is just one of them that I think there will be a lot of good learning and sharing and best practices that American cities would certainly need, but cities around the world could need as well.
Well, I'm going to use this opportunity to ask one last quick question out of my curiosity, because I don't have answer for that, and I've been looking for, and then we'll open the floor. How can there be a clear definition of what is national security, real national security, and what is not? Because we've heard talks like Chinese-made connected vehicles are like iPhones on the streets for the United States. So when it comes to AI, when it comes to autonomous driving, how do you set the rules? Because otherwise you cannot cooperate. Nothing, everything can be used for dual purposes or not, to harm national security. From researchers' perspective, very quickly, Dr. Zhan.
Okay, I'm not an expert on this. So I think...
Don't have to be, just, have you thought about it?
Not really.
Not really?
Yeah, because I'm a tech guy, and I think maybe national security is like, is something that if you do not do well, then it will hurt your country's interest.
Of course, but if everything is meant to, it becomes national security, everything becomes dual use, then there is a problem. Gasoline can be dual use, rice can be dual use.
Yeah, so I think it's we need a very careful definition for this, and especially it's like if you are put too much restriction on something, basically it won't always get the best outcome because it's like for restrictions, you put too much restriction on AI, actually you kill innovation. But if you do not regulate it at all, maybe bad thing will happen. So it's a very subtle decision to be made.
Sure.
I think Kevin maybe is a better expert on this.
You're punting this hard one to me. I think the vagueness is, first of all, by design, and we'll just leave it at that. I think that partially illustrates just how new and unknown this technology really is, but it also illustrates this anxiety of the unknown. I am personally, speaking just for myself, not terribly worried about it. My answer to your question intellectually would be, I don't know. And you know what the hardest thing to tell an AI to do if you're using a chatbot? Get it to say, I don't know. You can spend days talking to ChatGPT, Claude, Ernie, what have you. Just ask whatever you wanted to ask. Get it to say, I don't know, because you know it doesn't know everything, right? It's not AGI, it's not some crazy super intelligence. It's pretty cool. It's very useful, I think, in a lot of ways. You cannot get it to say, I don't know. So you know you're talking to a human right now because I just admitted to you that I don't know the answer to this very tough question. And
We
I think,
appreciate that.
Yeah, and that's very important, right? To like really, I know there's I was reading the CISS brochure. There's a section in there on AI safety, AI risk. These are all very important topics to think about. But we are sort of projecting the fear a little bit. And I hope we can all kind of take a deep breath and keep on working on this technology to combine the best, the brightest, but also the most well-intentioned people from the United States, from China, from Sweden, from wherever, what have you, to just talk about this literally on the mathematical level, right? It's basically a mathematical representation of stuff on the internet that we can think of as like human collective knowledge, and there's a lot of fast improvements on that. But we should contextualize our fear, generally speaking, as a public to help move this conversation productively.
Great. Well, thank you.